It's really a challenge to think about, or rather to think about what to say, to honor Swamiji again on the so close to the anniversary of his leaving this world, which is in 2 days on April 21st. We will have a number of celebrations of his life. There's today, and on Tuesday in the evening, Jyotishji and Deviji will lead a worldwide meditation dedicated to Swamiji's moksha, and dedicated to his life. We will send the link out for that. It's available on the ananda.org website, but we'll send it out as well. And also, actually this evening they are going to be giving a talk, I think at 8 o'clock. We'll send the link and the news out for that too. So even this evening we can celebrate with them. The talk they're doing tonight is just for India. Anyone else is welcome to join, of course, but the timing and everything is targeted at India. Really, it's so nice to see you all on the TV that way. I wish I could just look at it the whole time and talk to you that way, but we don't have the angles worked out exactly right with the camera and the TV. So, in addition to the celebrations that we're having today and on Tuesday, we will also be celebrating Swamiji's life. Every week for the next 4 weeks, we will, or maybe it's 4 or 5 weeks, I'm not sure, we'll dedicate a satsang to some aspect of Swamiji's life, whether it's his work in terms of his writing, his music, his all of his lectures, communities, and so on, or whether it will be different periods of history. I'm not sure yet. We're still putting together our design. The reason we're choosing it this way is because April 21st is Swamiji's Moksha Day, and then May 19th is his birthday. And this is one of the few times that Dharmini and I are here in Chennai at this time. Normally when the schools close and the heat comes on, we shuffle away or scuttle away, and then we come back at the end of it. We're always together celebrating, from America. We would do the Skype calls and so on, but this year we are all in Chennai, and yet we're still somehow talking through the internet, and so it's certainly not fair. So we thought, for the first time, we've never done it before, that we would take this time from his Swamiji's Moksha Day through his birthday to celebrate his life. You might ask, why celebrate Swamiji? And you might not ask why. It might be obvious to you. And yet still, it's something that's worth considering, in the sense that of course, we can see that Swamiji, as the founder of Ananda Sangha, as the writer of so many books about Master, of again him expressing Master's teachings, applying Master's teachings to so many different dimensions of life, whether in education or in marriage or in business, in art. So many, again, of his books take Master's teachings as a central theme and then apply them. Even recently I was discussing with someone about how Swamiji was applying Master's teachings to the theory of evolution and of Western philosophy in general. And so it's so powerful, of course, to see all that he did for the world in terms of taking Yoganandaji's teachings further. That way we have Master's teachings and Swamiji's application of those teachings. We can also look at what Swamiji has done for each of us personally. Remember, Swamiji left the body in April, on the 21st in 2013, but on January 20th, almost exactly 3 months before, I guess that math works out right, 3 months before, he was in Chennai at the Music Academy. and giving his now famous lecture that brought so many people from Chennai to that hall that night. Some of you were there that evening. And 7 years ago, that launched this work of Ananda Chennai. Again, just to say it clearly, the center of Ananda Chennai, or the fact that it was coming, it was birthed or conceived overnight. And that never happens in a center. It always takes years, usually, for a group to form and so on. I won't outline the whole process, but in one city in India, it took about 14 years for the center to finally be established in a physical place. So, as opposed to just having a rented hall from time to time. So, in Chennai's case, it was just, an hour and a half of Swamiji's lecture. And that evening, as soon as he finished the lecture, he said, we must have a center here. In fact, even the day before the lecture, he was feeling it. He had written to Dharmini and me before his lecture saying, I'm thinking of asking you to come to Chennai. And so, of course, that was hard to cognize when we were in Los Angeles and very much heading in a different direction. But as I reflected later, we were only heading in that direction because Swamiji had asked us to. And so if we said, well, no, we're in Los Angeles, we can't go to Chennai, but how did you come to Los Angeles? The giver of the order is now giving a new order. In fact, this is a helpful thought for all of us in general. When we hear God's guidance in meditation or with our intuition, it's good to follow that guidance, but keep listening, because that guidance may change. The initial guidance that we get may not have been the whole picture. It may have been a part of it. So as Swamiji would often say, God may tell you to go north, and then you can just charge for go east, say, and you can just charge for the horizon. But instead, I guess the horizon is in all directions, isn't it? I've sort of had to think that one through for a moment. Go east, charge for the horizon, and then he may say, after 10 feet, now turn north. But we say, east! I'm sorry, I only follow one order ever, and no more. Updates are allowed. And so in the same way, it took us a little while to adjust ourselves to this. But after Swamiji had that response in Chennai in January, he said it must happen. And because he said that, because Chennai drew that blessing, and because Ananda was mobilized to help support Swamiji's vision in founding a new center, it isn't as if there was just money lying around and extra plane tickets and all these things, even a building, everything. It wasn't all just ready. It all had to be mobilized and manifested from God through Master and Swamiji, through many of you, and certainly all of you now going forward. But it was Swamiji's word and Swamiji's wish that made that happen. As Jayaji said to us at the time, when everyone else was in shock too, like, we have a new center now? What? Okay. He said, when Swamiji says something, it tends to happen. It always tends to happen, but he said gently, it tends to happen. So even though he was saying, I don't have all the numbers and the clarity and the full picture right now, I have the feeling that this will happen, that it will work out. And in fact, here we are. So it's really a joy to know how each of us personally has been impacted by Swamiji. Really, you could say Swamiji's gift to us here in Chennai was, at the very least, but very specifically, this center, our spiritual family, each one of you coming together. It's not always the case. I mean, someone may be impacted by his teachings, by his music, by Ananda through, for example, others who Swamiji had trained. All of these are precious gifts too. But in Chennai's case, we have a direct link, you could say. Because without Swamiji saying we should have a center in Chennai, we don't know when we would have. And also, this was the last center that Swamiji founded during his lifetime. And so that's precious too. He grabbed us all before he left. Now, so we can talk about Swamiji's impact generally through his work. We can talk about it specifically through our own lives and how they have changed through his blessings, through his words, through his actions here in Chennai. Also, though, and perhaps most importantly, Swamiji brought the consciousness of Master to us. That's how I feel. I feel a very close connection to Master, but with Swamiji, that connection became grounded in reality. You see, because you can read a book of Master's, you can listen to a talk, and then certainly he has the power to reach us, but how much openness or capacity do we have to receive him? And so, on a sort of intellectual level, Swamiji would explain things to us that otherwise we would have no way of knowing. For example, in the recordings of Master's talks, speaking to the disciples at the Christmas meditations, those are recordings we have that have been released by SRFYSS. Master speaks very strongly and encourages us. We must meditate and do not look left and right and go straight ahead, march to the end, and very strongly. And Swamiji said, you know, when Master was with the disciples, he almost never spoke like that. He said, these talks, though wonderful, are the exception rather than the rule. He was very, very gentle, very kind, very encouraging, helping people wherever they were to take the next step forward. Now, when he said that, it was a surprise to know that, because we wouldn't know necessarily otherwise without a first-hand observer, but it wasn't a surprise to hear that Master was gentle, was encouraging, was helping people from where they are to go forward, because we saw that's how Swamiji was. In fact, when Swamiji wrote the book, Paramhansa Yogananda, a biography, which in fact the video that you saw of him singing Love as a Magician, that was a launch of that book in Seattle, a book launch. When Swamiji wrote that book, he included a chapter, I think it's 33, or maybe it isn't, but it has maybe 33 salient characteristics of Master. So Yoganandaji's salient characteristics, so different qualities of Master and his personality, which of course was just a window for the divine, but still a beautiful window filled with lessons for us. As Swamiji listed Master's patience and his sense of humor and his way of speaking to someone just in a manner that would allow them to remain open to them. For example, if he didn't have someone's name at the top of his memory, and don't ask me how that's possible, because people will argue, well, if Master's one with God, he knows everything, why doesn't he know a person's name? Swamiji said once to Master, he asked him a similar question, and Master said, I have a very difficult job managing my divine side and my human side. You have no idea how difficult it is to basically navigate these two territories. And you see it with saints. Many saints, they are just in the divine. And they're not necessarily very personable, very human. They may just sit in silence for hours. And they can be. But in fact, Swamiji said it takes as much willpower for a master to come down to our level as it does for us to come up to his level. That's saying something, since most of us haven't reached his level yet. I certainly haven't. And so when Master would not know someone's name, he would say, "What is your full name?" rather than saying, "What is your name?" And so in a gentle way, he would, if he gently corrected someone, he would say, "You don't mind me saying that, do you?" You see, he was very careful with people to make sure they remained open, because you know how it is. One harsh word, one cutting remark, one scolding, and we can pull away. I had that experience once when Swamiji was scolding me, and it was for something I felt that I hadn't done, or I felt it was maybe unfair, and that even proved all the more reason why I deserved the scolding. And in the middle of it, I felt part of me just saying, wanting to close up a little bit and sort of defend myself. And I just felt strongly, nobody loves you more than he. And no one in this world loves me more than Swamiji does. And so I relaxed and kept my heart open and just took it in. I was a little hurt. It took me a little while to sort of integrate the whole thing. But as Dharmini said to me later, even if Swamiji's facts are wrong, Swamiji is right. And I don't even know that his facts were wrong, but in any case, he was right no matter what the sort of implication or the origin of his comments. He talked about a similar experience with Master. I'm so grateful for that scolding now, because he was speaking as he said Master was speaking. That when Master scolded anyone, or when Swamiji said when he scolded me, which was not often, Swamiji said, he said, I could see deep regret in his eyes that he was forced to speak this way because his message wasn't getting through in other ways. And so he had to get our attention. Swamiji certainly had to get my attention. So really, Swamiji made Master real to us. In fact, he said this is the duty of every disciple, to make the Guru real to others, to serve as a channel for the Guru, and to invite the Guru's consciousness into himself or herself. And again, this is what we saw in Swamiji. At the end of his life, he said, I don't know where Yoganandaji ends and Kriyananda begins. He felt so united with Master. And again, we really felt it. I felt that I had lived with Master in a way because I had lived with Swamiji. And we see in both the case of Master and Swamiji too, you may say, well, why celebrate their leaving of the earth? That's not something to celebrate. And of course that's true. It was quite sad. At the same time, they never really left. I was very sad when Swamiji left the body. The first reaction I had was to burst into tears. And that sadness lasted for some time. And then the next morning, when Swamiji left the body, it was early Sunday morning in Italy. That's where he was. And it was before the morning meditation and satsang there. And it was still evening. It was 11 o'clock in the evening or something in America, in California. And so Saturday night. So in other words, we all got the news in America. And then the next morning, we were all gathered for Sunday satsang. Dharmini and I were living at Ananda Village at that time. And we all came in just, of course, in shock. On the one hand, Swamiji had been preparing us for years by saying, first of all, his health was always giving him trouble, especially in the last, the last 10 years of his life, more than that, yeah. In fact, he'd always had challenges physically. I feel he was working out so much karma of others on his own body. In fact, once when somebody said, Swamiji, you're suffering so much because you're taking on our karma, Swamiji looked down and quietly said, well, we all have to do our part. And I remember when I felt that Swamiji was going through a very difficult time on behalf of someone else who was themselves going through a very difficult time. And on the one hand, I felt almost angry with that person, that why should you go through such a difficult time and then Swamiji has to go to the hospital? I don't know if this was true, if it was real, if I was just making it up, but it had a ring of truth to it, at least in my heart. And so I felt that, but when I sort of had that frustration, I felt, on the other hand, Swamiji would say, I imagined, I would do this for any one of you. And so, in fact, afterwards I wrote that to Swamiji in an email while he was in the hospital, and Narayani later shared that Swamiji said, well, maybe that's what's going on. Maybe that's why he was in the hospital, because of that person's karma. Who knows? He was always helping us. And in some cases it was rather dramatic. There's a wonderful story, which I don't have the time to go into now, of how Swamiji was riding a small motorcycle and fell and had a horrible injury on his leg. And right at that time, a devotee of Swamiji's who was riding a motorcycle was hit head-on by a huge lorry and was basically bounced off the truck and hit the ground and was completely fine, not even a broken bone. And the man later wept when he found out that Swamiji was hurt. At the same time, of course, Swamiji recovered, but he knew that Swamiji had protected him, because the man kept saying, I should be dead, and couldn't understand how he had survived. So, as I said, the next morning after Swamiji's passing, we were all at the Ananda Village temple at the Expanding Light at that time. And we began at 9 o'clock with the fire ceremony, and there was Swamiji's voice leading us in the mantras. And it was confusing because Swamiji's gone and yet he's right here. And we were all doing the mantras as if, his voice was just as strong and clear as it had always been. And later I felt, because I was very sad, but during the meditation I felt that Swamiji saying that I'm right here. And that was very powerful for me, and in fact that feeling has continued. Swamiji, you could say, also in a way trained us, because he was always traveling between India in his last years since 2003, so the last 10 years of his life, between India, Italy, and America. And so sometimes Swamiji was in your country, but for 2/3 of the time or more, he wasn't. And so you had to get used to emailing him or connecting with him from afar, or seeing videos of him or hearing news of him, and not just having his physical presence around, but still tuning in to him. And as he would write books, he would send the chapters out to all of us to read, to comment on, which is, of course, to enjoy. And so there was that contact, but it was from a little bit of a distance. And so we got used to training our minds to think of him, to ask him questions. It got to the point where when you would write an email to Swamiji, you wouldn't always get an answer back. Sometimes you would, but sometimes at the end of his life we found that if we wrote him an email and then sat down to meditate, we would get the answer just then. Was it sent by him? Was it received by us? I don't know the mechanics of it all, but we got an answer. And in some cases, he would write back later giving that same answer. And he did speak about how he would project his thoughts to others. Once somebody was saying how when they were starting a new work in Italy, somebody said Swamiji basically just dropped us off in Italy and said good luck, and then got on the plane and left. And Swamiji heard that this person had said that, and he said, how can you say that? He said, my mind was constantly on you all. I was sending you energy. I was holding you, you could say, in my aura, in his aura, and I was always with you. And so, and he was, of course, phoning them regularly, once a week, or regularly anyway. It wasn't so easy in those days to call Italy, to call internationally as it is now. So we got used to, as I said, putting our minds on Swamiji even when he was out of sight. And that connection has continued for so many. So many people have spoken of how they have felt Swamiji's guidance, and they have felt a connection to him. They have felt his presence. Some people have had dreams of him Some people have seen him in some cases, like someone was having surgery and suddenly saw him in the room and felt him massaging their arm, which was where the broken bone was that they was being operated on. So very dramatic stories that people have had, but also just a quiet feeling of connection in the heart. I've never had that experience with anyone else who has left the body. When they've left the body, they've more or less, it might be around for a few days, but then they've gone on, as it should be. Because if we're not free, we have more work to do. In Swamiji's case, we could feel, many of us, that connection continuing, and that connection is open to all. It isn't that it was just his favorites any more than it's Master having favorites. He's trying to reach us much more than we are trying to reach him even. And so it's important for us to keep our ears open, our hearts open, our minds open. So when I felt Swamiji's continued presence, it was a great comfort to me, and then I stopped crying. And I felt also that later I reflected on how Swamiji said, "Master is more with me now than when he was in the body," and how Master said that my Master, Sri Yukteswarji, is more with me now, more real to me than when he was in the body. And so that's quite encouraging, that we don't have to ever feel that our Guru is gone, our Masters are gone. If ever we feel they're gone, it's because we're gone. And so we have to just recollect ourselves, get centered again, ask for their help about something very immediate, and any immediate need that you have. Don't feel that it has to only be, I can ask for samadhi, but I can't ask for help with this bank problem. You can ask for help with the bank. Who's in charge of the bank? God, Master, the Gurus. They are the trustees. Master is the chairman. You can always go to a higher authority. And so after that, again, Swamiji left the body, start in America time, let's just say, Saturday evening. The next morning, we gathered for Sunday service. Jyotishji and Deviji spoke about Swamiji, and we were all just reeling. And then we weren't sure if we could go to Italy, to where Swamiji was. It wasn't that we couldn't go, but we didn't want to all invite ourselves over. Anyway, it was a subtle thing, because there was a message sort of seeming to say, please don't all come, because in any case Swamiji's body will be brought back to America. And then Kirtaniji and Anand sent out a message saying, everybody who wants to, please come. And so as soon as we heard that, we got on the phone with the airlines, and it was really quite a sweet thing for Dharmini and me, because we called the airline and we saw a flight that would take us from San Francisco to Rome with one stop in between, a very direct flight. And not a non-stop flight, but still, there were many. It had only one stop and not many more, and easy timing for us. And when I called, the person said, "I'm sorry, there are no seats left." And I said, "Oh, but we've had a death in the family." And they said, "Oh, I'm sorry. Let me see what I can do." And so I began to wonder, if there are no seats left, what can you do? I imagined maybe a seat sort of stapled to the outside of the plane, resting on the wing or something. Like, how do you get more seats? And then she came back and she said, "I've got a seat for you." And I said, "No, I'm sorry, two, my wife and I." And so she said, "Okay, hold on." And I wondered, are she stapling a seat to the other side of the plane? And then she said, "Okay, I've got 2 seats for you. You must be meant to go." And it was very sweet to hear that. Later, we were sitting in the back row of the plane, the very last row. You couldn't go further, right up against the bathrooms, not necessarily one's first choice. We were thrilled to be on the plane at all. And what was interesting was in the middle of the night, once the cabin lights went out, one of the flight attendants, two of them were walking by, and one of them said to the other, gesturing at the seats we were sitting in, "I thought we had that row to sleep in." And the other one said, "Yeah, I don't know." And so I thought, oops, maybe those were the extra seats that materialized for us. So anyway, it was really wonderful to be able to go and be there at that time. Afterwards, at Ananda Village, we had a memorial service. So in other words, the funeral for Swamiji the astral ascension was held in many places, but with his body, it was held in Assisi, Italy, where he had left the body. He was in his home when he left the body. And and that ceremony took place there. Then a few weeks later, I think it was on Swamiji's birthday. I'm not sure exactly, but I think so. We had a memorial service, in other words, when there's time to prepare and invite everybody so they can make travel plans. People did whatever they could with no notice that first week of his passing, but then a few weeks or a month later maybe, we all were able to gather and have a ceremony for basically the dedication of the Moksha Mandir. And they carried a bust of Swamiji, down to the place where his body was going to be placed. And of course the Moksha Mandir has been built. That's where Swamiji's body is now. You've probably seen photos and videos of it. It appears at the end of the Answer movie just in computer graphics form because it hadn't been built at that time of the making of the film. And it's the small building with the beautiful blue roof and the cupola at the top, just like the Temple of Light now at Ananda Village, the Temple of Light at Ananda Assisi, and Ananda Seattle too. That's the Ananda temple style. If we build a temple, we build it in that Ananda way. It's according to Swamiji's design. So what I'd like to share with you now, and again, forgive me for speaking so personally, because I guess the consolation is that we'll be able to, throughout these next weeks, cover many different aspects of Swamiji's life. But again, the thought I want to leave you with is how Swamiji really brought Master to life for all of us, and that continues. So it's wonderful that we have our gurus, we have Master, and we have Swamiji too.